So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are tuning in on the planet. We would love to have you say hello in the chat and tell us where you are from. And I'll start with my introduction by saying I am Tricia Bennett, and I am one of the founding members of Shamans Directory. And there are about 50 of us behind the scenes working to bring Shamans Directory to life. Today is one of our live events, and we offer our live events for a couple of reasons. One is because we really like to get to know other shamanic healers and teachers, and we want to introduce them to the world. And we also want potential clients and students to be able to see what a shamanic healer or teacher is like and what it might be like to work with him or her. So we are delighted to welcome Christina Allen today from the Austin Shamanic Center in Austin, Texas. And she's going to be offering her wisdom around energetic healing for stressful times. Before we start, I just want to tell you a little bit about Shamans Directory. Shamans Directory is a pretty brand new online portal for shamanic healers and teachers. We just opened the doors to the directory a week or so ago. So we're open for the next 4 to 6 weeks for healers and teachers to join us on the directory. And after that point in time, the search function will open so that people who are seeking healing and want to take courses with healers and teachers can find them around the world. And let's see, it's actually a platform that many of you probably know, platforms like Psychology Today, Therapy Tribe, Good Therapy, the International Energy Medicine Directory. So it's a very user-friendly professional platform designed for indigenous, First Nation healers, as well as European and Western trained shamanic healers and teachers. So we are excited to welcome you today. And I ask each of the healers or teachers who comes on if they would like to have some sort of a reading to get people in the space of the talk for the day. And Christina chose something from the Tao. Would you like me to read it, or would you like to read it, Christina?
Why don't you read it? I did, yeah, why don't you read it?
That's great. I'm happy to. Sometimes I didn't know if you might like to hear it in your own voice this morning, but I'm happy to. So this is from the Tao Te Ching, and it's chapter 11 from Stephen Mitchell's translation. It's very short, and I will read it twice. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay in a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. So I'm going to read that one more time just because it's nice to really take it in. We join spokes together in a wheel, but is the center hole that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use. So I'm just going to take a minute to introduce Christina. So Christina Allen's path spans more than 30 years apprenticing and practicing with renowned spiritual masters of yoga, Reiki, and shamanism. After a decade of studying and working as a lead teacher with the Four Winds Society, she continued her studies, training extensively with Joan Parisi Wilcox and Juan and Nuñez del Prado. In 2013, she started the Austin Shamanic Center, where she works with students and clients from around the world practicing and teaching energy medicine. She is passionate about integrating the power and wisdom of ancient indigenous medicine with her formal studies of physics, biology, psychology, and neuroscience. Her aim is to contribute to a global community of grounded, authentic human beings who step up to hold the door open for the evolution of human consciousness and to be of service to humanity. So these days, along with a busy training schedule, Christina is using her shamanic methods to help people to recover from induced trauma, flight, fright, or freeze. I always get stuck on that, fight, flight, or freeze. And we're going to hear about her practice, some of her upcoming trainings, and also experience a little bit of healing in the area of trauma and that the way we're all feeling sort of paralyzed and frozen these days by world events and the pandemic and everything else that we've been experiencing over the past few years. So welcome, Christina. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. What an honor. What a treat.
So let us know a little bit about well, first of all, I should say that Christina is also one of the ambassadors of the directory. And she's one of the first people who said yes and came on board and said it's time for healers and teachers from around the world to come together. So we want to thank you for that, for being a yes, because all of the yeses have really been sort of the wind beneath our wings that have kept us going and believing in the mission. And so thank you so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I really like what you guys are putting together. It's very elegant, very clean, and thorough. I like that you're reaching all across the globe, reaching through all kinds of different kinds of energy medicine, shamanism, all the different ways that it shows up. Each culture creates their own form of indigenous teachings or form, energetic teachings, based on their environment, based on their culture, based on how they think. And so it's important to get a full span, a full representation of all the different ways that energy medicine and shamanism show up. And it's a tricky thing because the word shaman, I think, has so many different, so many gut responses from people that sometimes are very good and sometimes are off-putting. But part of putting together this directory, I think, is trying to normalize that word and giving it a basic function. And one of the things that I really appreciate about your perspective is there's this one world, one fire, where all of our medicines are coming together at this fire so that we can all contribute globally to whatever shifts and healing need to happen on this planet at this time. So yeah, I think you guys are doing a great thing here.
Thanks. We are it's quite a task, but it's, as you said, there's so many different kinds of medicine out there to be offered, and each piece of it is critical and integral to the whole. So we're hoping that bringing different healers and teachers onto the platform will highlight their areas of the world and their teachings and what they have to offer. And we're hoping that it will ignite some sacred activism around the planet. That when you receive healing from someone, you're more likely to want to preserve what they have to offer. And so we're delighted to have you on board with us. So let's see. Do you want to share a little bit about your path to becoming a shamanic healer and teacher?
Sure. I think I came at it a couple different ways, or maybe they're all the same way. I had trauma when I was a child that was repressed. I didn't even realize I had it. And so part of it was I was gaslit about it. And so my journey to finding myself and finding my truth and finding that, no, I actually wasn't crazy, all those kinds of things was part of what took me to shamanism, because I couldn't find a solution in the regular medical establishment and psychiatric establishment other than to be put on medication. But it never really resolved the underlying problems. And it wasn't until I started. So there's a whole part that I can talk about. That's the unwinding of my trauma, which, as most of us know, like your wounding becomes your medicine. You end up being able to really see into that spectrum of being after having gone through some big pieces. So part of my journey was reclaiming myself, reclaiming my sanity, reclaiming those parts of myself that made me feel unsure about the world, unsafe in the world. And then the other part was just this natural sense that that's what I came here to do. I remember in high school, in my junior and senior year of high school, reading all the Carlos Castaneda books that were around at that time, which were only 4 at that time. And just lighting up and going, this is what I want to do. But I didn't know how to do that because I was, a white chick from the suburbs, middle class, there was no path for that. And, I got scooted into college and university, and, there's no medicine person on the major list. There's no shaman on the major list. So I sort of bumbled around for a little while and studied lots of different things. And finally, I had an experience in Alaska. I used to work in Alaska in the summers, putting myself through college. I would work as a cook in geological exploration camps and just run these camps up there at the base of Mount Denali and out in the Arctic Circle, just way up there. And I would have these really soulful summers where I would just tap into the land, into the magic of the land. I was raised in Alaska, so there was a lot of Native American influence up there. And there was just something, that would contribute to that sense of wanting to be a healer, be a shaman, be connected to the earth, use that medicine. And so I took the practical approach. There were these, in these camps that I was working in, there were geologists flying around in helicopters, picking up rocks. That's the way they spent their summer. I thought, I could do this. Like, if I have to pick something, since what I want isn't on the list, this seems like kind of a cool thing. And in studying to become a geologist, I had to take physics. And then that's when it all kind of came together for me, as I went, oh, okay, the shamanic path is physics in the Western world. If you really want to understand that interface between matter and energy, if you really want to understand that the role of consciousness in co-creating that, the Western version of that is quantum mechanics. So I went, I buckled up and went through that and got my degree and realized, like, I actually do not want to be a physicist. I just wanted the information. I'm not that technical person who wants to look in oscilloscopes and be on the computer all day. That wasn't my lifestyle choice. But I got the information that I needed. So I kind of went the Western route for a while, not knowing how to get back to the shamanic route, all the while I'm trying to heal. So there's like these two kind of paths that are going at the same time. I went back to graduate school, started studying neuroscience, as I thought consciousness is the thing that links all these things. I want to understand consciousness, but of course, in the Western tradition, consciousness is very, very, it's very physical. It's very materialistic. It's this neuron talks to this neuron, and this matrix of neurons talks to this matrix of neurons. And I was doing my dissertation on how reliable the synapses are in the rat hippocampus for learning and memory, which is interesting, but it wasn't rocking my boat. It wasn't what I really wanted to study. And then sort of that's when my whole, the two paths sort of converged. My mom died. And I had this sort of, spiritual awakening in a sense, and realized, consciousness actually is not this neuronal matrix so much. There might be a neuronal matrix that facilitates the realization of that. But I watched her still be conscious as her body was fading out. I was in complete communication with her through the whole time. And I went out as far as I could go with her before I kind of got like, this is it. You can't go any further than this piece. And I went,
Emily, you're not allowed beyond this point.
yeah. And so we're not in Kansas anymore. Like this, I couldn't go back and study the rat hippocampus after that. It just didn't work for me. So I sort of punted for a while. I was doing yoga at the time. But also the thing that was interesting was a lot of the trauma that happened in my life was tied up with my mother. So there was just my whole life sort of unraveled at that point, and I had to start all over again. And I put my PhD on hold. I never wrote my dissertation. I got all that far, but I just never wrote it. And then I started studying yoga. I'm like, I'm just gonna, do my yoga practice and garden until I figure out what to do next. And ended up going down that path for quite a while, started a studio, went to India, studied with a few different renowned teachers. And then finally, and just working on my stuff still. And I had always been asking for a shamanic teacher. And finally, in my early 40s, I went to this lecture that Alberto Villoldo was giving, and he was talking about quantum mechanics and shamanism. And I went, oh, okay, I see what I was waiting for. Somebody who can put this together. Because I probably wouldn't have done well just walking around in the jungle with somebody. But he has an intellectual understanding of what it is that's going on in this energetic realm. And he put them together, and it worked for me. And so I studied with him, and I studied with him for quite a while and taught for him and worked for him. And he taught me how to be a healer. And it is, it's beautiful medicine. It's actually beautiful medicine. And what I love about his teachings are he teaches you to get that you have to heal, you have to get out of the intellect, you have to get into a higher space. And there are various different ways of doing that. In his tradition, in his teachings, he uses breath work, but you can use drumming. In core shamanism, you use drumming, dance will take you out of it, psychotropics will take, plant medicines will take you out of it, all kinds of things to take us out of our intellect, because our intellect tends to keep us in our wounding. It manages everything. And this is where I really started to understand, this is where we come back to that Tao that you read, because it's the space inside. So you have to take people to this space instead of to the clutter of their story and their memories and their coping mechanisms and their beliefs. You have to take them to the space of reset. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the important things that shamanic healing can bring through, that that you don't necessarily get in a therapy session. Although therapy is a great thing, it tends to still work at the intellect. You tend to categorize and analyze and put it all in, but you don't have this experience of letting it all go so that you can reset. So that was one of the things that Alberto really, that I got from his teachings. And I stayed with him for about 10 years, and then it just was time to move on. His school was going through some changes, and I was going through some changes. And so that's when I started my own school here in Austin. And then a few years later, I ended up taking Joan Wilcox's online class. One of my students took her classes and did a journey with her in Peru. And he was very complimentary and said, you gotta check this out. And so I said, okay. And so I took her classes. I took them for the whole year, because she's got a series of classes. And it was eye-opening, because I had studied with Alberto, and Alberto had taught the Andean tradition, but through a lens, and he'd mixed a few other things in there. And I wasn't clear on what was conventionally Andean and what was not until I started taking classes with Joan. And then I saw the beauty of the actual tradition and how it was put together and why it was put together. And there's a whole brilliance in there that I didn't get from Alberto's teachings, but it's a different path in a sense. It's the path of a tradition and how it thinks about itself and how it's cultivated an energy medicine because it has nothing else. In the Andes, you're up in the mountains, way up in the mountains. There's a lot of rocks up there. There's some llamas, right? There's some alpaca, there's some plants, but it's not, filled with jungle plants and all kinds of things like that. And this is the thing that I notice is each shamanic tradition is cultured and kind of crafted through the lens of the culture that what was in their environment. And so when really digging into the tradition, you start to realize, oh, they really depend on each other to survive. So part of their medicine is really about interactions with each other. The whole middle section of the teachings is all personal relationship work. And it's about working with love, learning how to tune love to higher and higher frequencies that you can actually heal with. So there's that teaching, that was a new teaching for me. Also the cosmovision, the history, and there was a whole lot of teaching about what we'll talk about later, which is called the Inca seed, which is in the center of your chest. Like it's this little drop of the mystery of God's mind, in a sense, that's within us that we're trying to excavate, that we're trying to pull through and express. And that too is new to me. So so their medicine is all about how do you get that seed to grow and to prosper and to express itself. So they have lots of tools for clearing off your gunk, for clearing yourself out of your way, that are not about doing breath work, and they're not about changing your state of consciousness, which is a whole nother interesting thing. It's not the usual shamanic approach. And I like both of them, because here's the thing, as Westerners, we're really locked into our intellects. And I think we need a little bit of a kick to get into that space, that open space where we can use whatever it is, the energetics of the universe, the intellect of the universe. Otherwise, we're stuck in our own personal intellect, and we can't really quite jump in there. So I studied with Alberto, then Joan, I took Joan's classes, and I would periodically write her questions, and I was running my school, and my school was roughly based off the teachings that I had received from Alberto, but I'd taken them on my own path. And this was in 2019, I at the beginning of 2019, I started my online classes with Joan. And then by the end of 2019, I would periodically write her questions. And she, one time she said, let's talk about this on the phone. And I said, okay. And she said, can I ask you a question? And I said, yes. That's always a tricky question to answer. And she said, what do you see your future with the Andean tradition being, the Andean medicine tradition being? And I thought, I will continue to teach. I will continue to do healing. I'm not sure what you mean. And she goes, let me cut to the chase. She said, and this is through my lens, obviously, but she said, I want to share, what's left of the tradition. It's falling apart, people not falling apart, but it's getting diluted with a lot of different other kinds of perspectives and medicines. And I would like to really keep it pure and clean. Are you interested in, stepping up and really learning the full tradition? She goes, I've seen a lot of students over the years, and I just keep getting, drawn back to asking you if this is something you would like to do. And I went, oh, wow, because I was teaching more in the Alberto realm, which was kind of a loose base. It was loosely based on the Andean tradition. And I knew it was going to mean some major changes for me, but COVID came right on the heels of that. Like we talked in, I think, December, she asked me that, and I said yes. And then, we went right into COVID. And so everything I had created on the physical level in Austin just, we couldn't get together anymore. We couldn't teach classes together anymore. So it was just like that universal push, into what the next phase was. And so Joan was like, I got you, come on, let's teach online. We can do this. And she mentored me and taught me, we just spent a lot of time just learning all the ins and outs of the tradition, answered all my questions. Then she introduced me to her teachers, Juan and Yvonne Nuñez del Prado. And we got to ask them all the questions we wanted to. I got to know them. And then we just started teaching classes together after I got up to speed. So it's been a nice journey of those 2 years where we couldn't be in person. Joan and I just made this whole connection on the internet. We have never even met in person, but we're fast friends. And we're complementary to each other. We have different sorts of ways that we think and ways that we operate. And I like that the way that they work together. We both bring out each other's strengths. And as a duo, I think we cover this wide bandwidth, because I'm a healer and she's very intellectual. And so there's this sense of, she brings the intellectual and the wisdom and the background and that she knows the minutia of things. And I'm like this hold space, heal, move through your stuff kind of person. So the two of us, get together and we can create quite an interesting kind of dynamic. So that's where I am today. I think next year we will launch in physical space again. But this year I'm just finishing out doing a lot of internet stuff, and I'll still stay on the internet and teach as well, because it's great to be able to reach out to so many different kinds of people.
Right. Yeah. So will you and Joan teach together in person, do you think?
We might. We were talking about it actually before COVID hit. We were actually talking about it, and then COVID just came and swooped everybody into isolation. So there's a possibility. We haven't spoken of it since because we've just been so busy on the web together, but we might get her. I might get her down here into Austin.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the different courses that you offer?
Sure.
Either your own and or what you offer with Joan.
Sure. Yeah. So Joan trained me in the traditional teachings of the Andean cosmovision. And this is the work of Juan and Nuñez del Prado. I have a lot of it in the background, sort of from Alberto. And what's beautiful to me about this is, as I learned from Juan and Yvonne, what I started to see was exactly what it was that Alberto crafted. I really understood the nuts and bolts he used to create his program, and his program is very it's very creative, and I started to see, oh, I see this came from there, and that came from here, and this came from there, and so back to what I teach right now. Right now, what I'm teaching is the foundation work, the traditional work that Joan, trained me to get up to speed on. I've studied with Juan and Yvonne now too, and so that is called the Andean Foundation Training, and that is this beautiful set of teachings that are 3 sections of training. The 3 sections go along with the 3 sort of human personal powers. So there's the knowing, the intellect, the perception, the yachai. This is considered the right side, or the panya. And then there's that middle section of human interaction, of love, of exchange, of feelings, the munai section, and that's called the chaupi. And then there's the left side, which is more the shamanic tradition. It's the doing side, it's the action side, it's putting things into gear. So the training, the Andean Foundation training, is these 3 sets of, the right side, the left side, and the middle, all together over 2 months. So it's 2 days, it's a Saturday and 2 Saturdays and Sundays in June. This, the next one is 2 Saturdays and Sundays in July. And that gives you the foundation for how the Andean work is done. How it gives I think there are 43 different exercises in this. There are 4 different initiations and 3 core practices to really embody yourself as an energetic being, learning how to keep yourself clean and clear, how to overcome any kind of fear of the energetic realm, and how to maintain your your relationships with others. This is one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot recently. I'm going to get back to my classes in a second, but the middle section is how do you relate to others? And we tend to, in our culture, hear something, react, dig in, maybe talk to our friends about it. Maybe, you know, we tend to isolate and dig in. And the Andean tradition would instead be you connect to that person and mulch all the heaviness that is coming up around that exchange between the other person. It's never about vilifying the other person. It's about saying there's a connection between the two of you that you're maintaining that is gunky, and you can do what you need to do to clean that up. And when you clean up how you're engaging with that other person, it frees the whole thing up to a whole nother level, which is not something we do in our culture. We tend to kind of lock into the intellect and aloneness and divisiveness and, you know, gossiping and trying to get support from somebody else and, you know, various different things.
Holding on to the gunk.
Yes, very much.
Grab a hold of it and hang on to it.
Yeah, and then use it as ammunition.
Yeah.
And reason to not have to engage anymore. And what it does is it keeps us all in these little, you know, little, you know, circles. So anyway, the Andean tradition is all taught in the Andean Foundation training. That's 4 weekends in 2 months. And that's the foundation training for all the other stuff that I do. There is a little intro class for that, for those people that want to kind of get a running start, because it is a lot of Quechua, which is the language of the Andes. And it's some new concepts. So I just kind of give a little 1-day arc of what the 3 classes are in an intro class for people who want to get a bit of a running start. And then from there, once you have taken the Andean Foundation classes, then that's where Joan and I teach this beautiful program we put together called the Inner Tehuantin. And Tehuantin means 4. And so we take the archetypes, we blend. One of the things that's beautiful about the Andean teachings is it parallels Jungian psychology really well. They don't do any psychology there at all. It's all energy medicine. It's all very, very simple. They're not real big thinkers. They're doers. They're all in their hearts mostly. They're Munai instead of Yachai thinking. But because we have to break it all down, and we love psychology. We love the reasons, and we love the metaphors, and we love all this kind of stuff. So because we're teaching this in our tradition, it's interesting to take the Andean perspective and the Jungian perspective and put them in parallel and work through some of the stuff that's creating our gunk. And it's the journey of how you've created yourself. So just to come back to it briefly, there's this Inca seed that we're all you know, born with, and we're born with pure potential, the pure potential to be an enlightened being, you know, a completely aware human capable person. But we have these exchanges with our world that we go through as we're going through life, and they tend to shape how we want to present ourselves. And so we create our persona, our personality, like, this is the mask I'm going to wear for you. This is the mask I'm going to wear for you. This is the mask I'm going to wear for you. And then we put all the other stuff that's not working for mom and dad and our caretakers, we put down in shadow. Okay, in the Andean tradition, that would be the underworld, the unconscious in psychology. So we put it in shadow, so it didn't go anywhere, but now it's down there rumbling. And so that difference between what's conscious and trying to project its conscious thing and what's unconscious and living in shadow starts to denigrate your energetics, if you will. It starts to slow them down, make them muckier. And then then when we're muckier, we are not as in flow with the energetic universe. So the different pieces of the inner Tehuantin are the persona, which is where we're crafting our masks, the shadow, which is where we acknowledge what's underneath there. Then there's the animus anima, which is how we've culturally defined ourselves as masculine and feminine, what we've put in shadow to be masculine or to be feminine, reclaiming that so we can kind of marry the two parts of us ourselves. And once you've looked at those three things and put them together, now you start to see how you've been creating a lot of what we call hucha, heavy energy, just the energy that you were made out of, slowed down to keep yourself from being your optimal self. Your Inca seed is in conflict with your persona. Your persona is in conflict with your Inca seed. Your shadow is in conflict with your Inca seed. Your Inca seed's trying to be who you are. And we've done all these kind of things to filter it and say, well, this is who I am and this is who I'm not. And so we can't express our full being. So those are the first three kind of steps that we go through to get to this last piece of the self. Of the self is the spirit, the Inca seed. How do we express that in its unadulterated form, in its pure potential? And so those 4 classes we put together with a lot of documentation from the Jungian perspective, with personal exercises. And then in class, we have you do all that before. In class, we do a lot of the energy work that comes from the Andean tradition, and just really get in there and clean and clear and connect and empower, work with all the parts of our energetic anatomy to bring ourselves to that place of being able to really express our full potential. So I think both of us are really, I think it's a thing that both of us decided would be, a good thing to do. And we're both kind of like, wow, this ended up being kind of an amazing set of classes. So we do that together. We have 2 of those running at the same time every year. We've done that 2 years now. She and I also have these practice groups where we meet once a month online, and people, anyone who's taken the Andean Foundation training can be a part of those. And we answer questions. People just send in questions. We answer questions. We do energy work, exercises. And so that's my work with Joan. But then I'm also, so next year, my plan is to kind of swing back into some more in-person stuff as well, where I'm recreating, there's BC and BJ and AJ, before Joan and after Joan. Before Joan, I had a Mesa Carrier series, which was doing a lot of personal work as you were working with your Mesa. When I get to Joan, I realize, a Mesa is called a Misha. So now we are, which is a different thing. Like a Mesa is an altar, it's a Spanish word, but a Misha is the sign of your power as a Paco. It's a little bit different translation. It's the Quechua word for a Mesa. So now we're going to have a Misha Caring class, where again, we'll come back and in person go through, be in community, work some of the medicine together, and work some of the personal work that needs to be done to really step into this medicine, because it's all based on how congruent you are with the energetic mind, if you will, of creation. The more gunked up we are, the more in isolation we are, the more stuck in our stuff we are, the less effective we are in using that non-being that we're talking about with the Tao to do things with. So yeah, and then I've gone back and forth with doing Superceptor classes. Right now I'm not doing them, but those are classes to help people who are empathic, who are very sensitive to energy, find tools. I use the Andean tradition to help them see the energetic world in a different way. I've decided at this point to just kind of, come to the whole thing if it interests you, because I don't have that much time, and I have to cut some stuff out. And so people who are really sensitive will, without training, often go into a victim perspective. And they will think that they are being psychically attacked, that they are carrying people's energy, that they are, they're being sucked alive. They're being, people are vampires of their energetics. And in some spiritual perspectives, that is the motif. That's the teaching, that's the training, but it's not in the Andean tradition. In the Andean tradition, you are in this bubble of your own energy, Sami, the energy of creation, and no one can mess with that. No one. And your bubble is not a shield. It's just your sovereignty. It's like saying, no one's going to get in my body. It's like, how would that happen? no one's gonna get in my body. Like, you got yours, I got mine. So they see the same way with their energy field. Like, no one can get in your energy field. No one's gonna do anything to you, to the inside of your energy field. They might try and muck with the outside, but that is, you've got tools for cleaning and clearing the outside. And so when you start to shift into this place from victim, from, oh no, they're going to take my energy, oh no, they're going to psychically attack me, to I can clean and clear whatever comes my way, you start to come into a place of empowerment. You start to come to a place of, I can be solid, stable in any energy environment that I'm in. And in that, you start to build your strength as an energetic being, as a Paco, which is their word for shaman, as someone can hold space. And interestingly enough, the way they define the level of Paco you are is by what your reach is, how big the inside of that house is, how big the inside of that vase is, by what your capacity to hold that space is, and in effect, that the bubbles of all these other things that are beyond you. You might, in the beginning, you can only affect bubbles that are really close to you, but as you become more and more embodied, empowered, able to use the energetics clean and clear, you can have more and more regional effect. And so that's the journey of the Paco, which is very different than the journey of the victim empath that tends to come out of our spiritual New Age tradition. So I like to I call them superceptors because they're super perceptive. I like to bring them into the fold and go, here's a path for you, that it's all about embodying your power and being able to use your sensitivity to actually become a powerful being instead of being mowed down by your ability to perceive. Use it to be able to become really strong.
So that the Superceptor is something that you're sort of incorporating into your Misha training now.
Yeah.
That it's just part of it.
Yeah, and the intro class, even with the intro class, you'll get a little bit of that, but I don't have the time anymore to teach that as a separate thing.
Mm-hmm. And can you say again, the Mesa is an altar and the Misha is a personal representation of your power? Is that how you said it?
Essentially, yeah, the translation of Misha means sign. So it's the sign that you are a Paco, right? So, in northern traditions, you might have a feather. You might have something, a big bear claw in your neck. In the Andean tradition, you have a Misha. And the Misha is the sign of your personal power, but it's also functional. It also is able to clear, because it's so filled with it's sort of an externalization of who you are as a Paco. So here I can carry it around, but I don't need it. I am that already, but I can take it out of me and I can take it over you and bring energy to you. I can engage with you in the physical realm through my Misha, but it's also a sign. It also is just, that's what a Paco has, is a Misha. And there are various different things you do with it. You give initiations with it. You can clean and clear with it. You can transmute the heavier energy back up to light energy again. But it's more than an altar, and not that anyone ever said that that's all a mesa is, but right. The word itself has a lot more meaning. Misha has a lot more meaning because it's more than just a practical thing like an altar. It is a sign of your power. You carry one. Anyone can carry one. The level of what we would call power or karpai that it has is reflective of the Paco, of the person who's carrying it.
Wow. So when you're teaching these courses, do people come with a ready-made Misha? Like, are they already a Misha carrier, or do you actually, is part of your course creating that?
Well, in the old days, when I did the mesa carrier, we would make a mesa as we went around. But what I realized when I started studying with Joan is there is no one way to create a mesa or a Misha. So what I do now is, and what my envision, because I haven't started the Misha carriers, that's going to start next year. But that way I see it is, you take the Andean Foundation series, and I tell you how to make a Misha, and I invite you to, and I lead you into that first part of creating one, and then you can do what you want to with it. If you want to go further with it, when you get to the Misha Carrier series, when we're doing it in person, then we'll really get into the nitty gritty and you know, like if you haven't made one yet, now's the time. Let's do that. Let's do that in the very first class. Let's get this going and start the process so that you're ready to move through with the rest of the class with one.
That's great. So for people who are listening who haven't already done your courses, the foundations course would be the place to start.
Yeah, unless you want a little runway to get comfortable with it. But yeah, the foundation class is the meat, but it's as it's called, it's the foundation class. It's where you start with this information. And what's interesting is it's not the same as my Mesa Carrier class. I know a lot of people go, "Oh, I took your Mesa Carrier class. Yeah, I'm right. That's cool. I already did that." And like, no, that's not what this is. This is a whole different animal. This is a whole different animal. This is working with, you know, the teachings that come directly from the Pacos, whereas the Mesa Carrier class got your feet wet with it and made you do a lot of personal work. This is getting into the nitty-gritty of working with the energetics, learning how to tune the energy, learning who you are as an energetic being, how to work with your, you know, cultivating your energetic environment in lots of different ways.
And which one is that? Which course is that? Where you're cultivating the energetic environment?
Just learning the basics, the foundation training.
Oh,
the foundation training is just where you get the basics, and then we go on to lots of different places from there. If you're local to Austin, we also do quarterly gatherings. Usually we were before COVID. We're just getting back to it. So there are, but one of the things that is important to me is creating community around all this. And so that was one of the things that I lost when we had COVID, is just the whole thing, the local kind of connections that I had and ceremonies and things that we would do just kind of dissipated. But on the other hand, it made a more global community. You know, when Joan said, "Come on, we're doing this," then I was able to stretch out into a bigger reach, if you will, and reach with other people. But there's still this sense of, as those of us that are in Austin, I think, you know, there's a lot of people that they're like, "Yeah, I don't want to do it on Zoom." And I get that, if you don't have to. You know, I think it's important to create a place where you don't have to, where you can really get the on the feet, in the room, in the, you know, in that space of creating with other people, working with other people. So that will be coming next year, but the foundation class is where everybody starts. Yeah.
So I'm seeing something in the chat about how to register. So can you register at your site, or is it only at Joan's?
For the Andean Foundation. So I teach the Andean Foundation classes, and Joan teaches the Andean Foundations, and we do them in different ways at different times.
Got it. Okay.
I have one that's starting June 4th, which is actually next weekend. It's 4/5. Just go to the website. I think you put it in the.
I put in austinshamaniccenter.com.
Yeah, and if you go to services, underneath services, it says workshops and retreats.
Mayumi's on it. She just put it in the chat with the link.
Okay, and then if you look, that'll say introduction to Andean mysticism. That's the intro class. That's just the 1-day feeler. And then the Andean Foundation training is where we start. This is where we jump in the deep end and start going, okay, let's do this stuff.
The Andean mysticism this is what you watch if you're thinking about taking it.
Yeah, it's to see if you like me. It's to put your toe in the water, to see if this is a path that works for you. It's just to test it out. And there are people who are like, "What is this Andean stuff?" And there are other people that were like, "I know I want to take it, but it's a lot of money and I don't know." So it's just to, you know, give you a feel for what it is. And then if it resonates with you, I encourage you to come. It's a lot of material, so it's worth every penny of it. We are in it for 8 hours each weekend, and just really getting into the nitty gritty of some really traditional teaching that took Juan 13 years to accumulate, and we get to do it in essentially 2 months. I give homework between the 2-week periods so that people can they can take it deeper if they want to. Some people will just take it for information and they'll go, oh, that was a nice job, that was a nice thing, now I know about Andean traditions. And some people will go, okay, I want to be a Paco, I want to step into this. So I give anyone who wants to be a Paco the information on how to do that.
Great.
In the classes in the space between classes.
If people have questions, if you could just type them into the chat, that would be great. And we will get to as many questions as we can. Let's see. So I had a question, and then when somebody raised their hand, I lost it. Oh, I was going to ask you, do you do individual work with people at all? Do you offer healing sessions?
Yeah, that's the whole other half of what I do. I do one-on-one healing sessions with people, and I work with people. I do 90-minute healing, energy medicine and breathwork sessions. It started off as the stuff that I learned from Alberto, and then I went on my own journey with it, and I've incorporated some of the tuning exercises from the traditional work. So now it's in the format of the traditional, the energetics of it are in the format of the traditional work with breath work, which is not traditional, and with an interview period where I find out, what's going on with you and what are you working on. But what I love about the way that I'm doing the in-person sessions is it's really good for people who've had things that they've stuffed in their unconscious. And usually that's trauma. Trauma is something we don't want to stick around and think about. We're like, yeah, no. And we put it in the unconscious, in the shadow. And then we have created like little parts of ourselves that are left behind to survive. And those parts eventually crash and burn because they're functional, but they're not full spectrum. They're not thriving. They're just surviving. And so what we do in these sessions is we talk about where the dysfunction is. And then we spend a little time talking, and then I get you on the table and we start running the energy, and we start doing breath work. And then part of what I learned in Alberto's work was how to track into the unconscious, and how to find those young parts of yourself that are running whatever the program is. And so we can pull those pieces up and bring them to consciousness. And then there's a whole thing that happens that would never happen when you're in your intellect. Your body will start to shake and let go of the trauma. Your mind will start to open up and let go of the story. There's a whole process that happens that you can't just get in a therapy session. That's beautiful, beautiful work. And I do a lot of that. I'm like crazy busy with that.
And that's all. Do you do any of that online, or is it all in person?
Yeah, no, I do it both. I do it on Zoom and I do it in person. In my mind, it's equally effective either way, because I'm working with you energetically. I'm sitting here chatting with you on Zoom. Like in the first part, we're talking together, then we're leaning in and breathing together. I'm running energy. Energy doesn't depend on space and time. So it's almost exactly the same. It's just not touchy-feely. It's not me touching you and doing any of that, but I can be relatively, charming and as it's all about feeling safe, and some people just think that they're not going to be able to do it on Zoom. They're not going to be able to go there. And there are a few people for whom that's true. But for a lot of people, it can work either way.
I'm seeing it's amazing, effective healing work in the chat.
Thank you.
And somebody else saying that they were trying to register and pay and it wasn't working. So maybe they can email you later and
Yeah, you can't pay from the website. You
got it.
you just sign up from the website, and then it goes to my email, and then I write you back, and I take your money and all that kind of stuff. I just like to have a little bit of a personal exchange with you before we do any kind of business stuff. So I have everything come as an email to my come as an email to me. So then I can exchange with you, and we can start a relationship from there.
Yeah, great. So what would you like to tell us today about, and I'm going to try to say it again, fight, flight, or freeze?
Yeah. So this is what's interesting to me about my background is, coincidentally, I studied neuroscience, and I was studying the hippocampus, which is very much involved in fight, flight, or freeze. And fight, flight, or freeze is the stress response that we have when something seems dangerous. So we normally we're in our parasympathetic nervous system, where everything's nice and sweet and good. When something happens that scares us, our sympathetic nervous system gets tripped. And what it does is it shunts all our digestive, all the blood that's in our digestive system to our muscles. We get ready to fight, or we get ready to run if that person's too big. And so there's this big adrenaline rush. There's this kind of, and you've seen those stories about the mom picks up the car, gets her child out from it. That's the adrenaline of the situation. But what can happen in trauma, especially childhood trauma, is your abuser is way bigger than you, and older than you, and stronger than you. And you do not have any sense of any way to run or any way to fight. And so you go into freeze. Freeze is the third response. There's another one they're calling fawning now, which is kind of similar. It's like, just pleasing the person. But freeze is the dangerous one. Freeze is the one that I like to work with people on. And it goes really well with the kind of work that I do. Because when you go into freeze, all that adrenaline, all that emotion, all that everything freezes. And it's kind of like the possum who plays dead. The goal is to survive. We dissociate, we leave our body, we go into shock. There's lots of ways to say it, but what happens is you are not able to process what happens. It just gets locked into your system. And energetically, I would say it gets latticed into your field, although we don't have any evidence for this. But what I watch is, as I start to do work with a person who's got freeze, I will watch their body start to tremble and release the energy as I run energy through them. And so there's this sense of the breath work gets them to relax enough to finally feel safe to let it go. And the energy work sort of matches the frequency of however it's latticed in there, and starts to break it up. And you'll see them just kind of shake and work this stuff out of their system. And once they start to release the freeze, then they can start to heal. But we can't heal when we're in freeze. And freeze is destructive. Like I was watching a one of those guilty pleasure TV shows that that you watch sometimes, but there was a great line in it. Alan Aldous said, he was playing a therapist, and he said, "Trauma is a thief." And I thought, yeah, that's true, because what happens is in freeze, you no longer have agency. You no longer can champion yourself. You no longer can say, "Get out of my way, get off my body, get out of my house, go away." And you end up appearing to be compliant. And this is the secondary level of trauma that happens from trauma, is you can't stop it from happening again. And so you end up having sort of a target on you. You end up apparently giving consent when you were not giving consent. This causes self-loathing, shame, all kinds of secondary things that are really hard to work through as a soul. As a person, the event happened. Yes, we have to process that, but downstream is this whole thing of how your personality and your sense of self-worth get just squished and demolished. And so the healing process is one, to let go of the freeze and to get it to thaw, and then to rebuild the person, to, you know, to bring them back and help them resolve all the, you know, all the trauma, all the belief, all the self-hatred, all the, you know, there's a whole bunch of work that needs to be done to bring that person back up to speed. So that's the work I'm really diving into right now. I'm loving it. It's really rewarding. It takes time, because trauma, we don't come back to our trauma until we feel safe. And so we'll be well into adulthood before we start to do this work. So we can have a lot of stuff that we've already compounded on top of it before we really start. And that's the healing crisis. There's usually some last straw that, like, okay, now I'm going to have to do something about this. And we finally get into doing the work. And it's interesting because people don't know that shamanic healing is you know, a relatively effective way of working with trauma and with the soul. You know, that shamanic healing is all about working with the soul. And the soul is the one that's registering the whole thing. The soul is the one that's kind of going, hey, what I like to say to my clients is, it's your soul that called me up. Because they'll come in and they'll be like, I'm fine, I'm good, everything's good. And I'm like, yeah, but you made an appointment with me. And so, like, the soul's the one that made the appointment, right? And the intellect's like, yeah, I can manage this, I'm good, I got it. Yeah. So it's working with that soul that wants to heal, that wants to become whole again. And one of the things in the shamanic tradition is when we face fright, you know, we will lose a piece of our soul. It will go into, in the Andean tradition, it goes into the earth, it goes into Pachamama. She holds it, keeps it safe. And that's called soul loss. And so part of healing from trauma is soul retrieval, bringing those pieces back, making the soul whole again. Those pieces that go into hiding are the part of us that would champion ourselves, that would say, get out of my space. You know, the part that's able to defend ourselves, the part that part is no longer accessible. It's in shadow. It's not available to us. And so part of healing is doing enough work to where we can bring that part back safely, and it will say, okay, I'm ready to come home. And I'll have people write me and go, yeah, I need a soul retrieval. And I'm like, okay, well, I hear you, but we got to make sure you're not a crack house right now, right? We got to make sure, we got to clean up the environment that you're in so that soul piece will want to come home and stay.
Yeah, that beautifully said, all of that. Can you say anything about healing crisis? Like, I mean, I know what you're referring to, but is there a way that you could talk about it a little bit so that people who aren't aware of that phrase or what it might look like or feel like might have a sense of whether they might be close to that place or tiptoeing around it or avoiding it? Or
there are lots of versions of it. It's going to be a crisis of some sort. It can be a physiological crisis. I have one client whose pelvis just said, I'm going to go to Siberia for a while until you fix this. And I have clients who get sick, who get really ill, get cancer, get all kinds of different things. And it's not really necessarily about clearing up the cancer. The cancer is sort of symptomatic. The pelvis is symptomatic of this breakage that's happened inside at the level of the soul. So it can show up as illness. It can show up as it can show up as like just this crisis, like everything just crashed and burned. My wife left me. I lost my job. My dog died. Just everything
happening all at once.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of times it's what we call a dark night of the soul. And this is the interesting thing I think for a lot of shamanic healers is people come to them as the last refuge. Like, I tried everything else. Why not do this crazy stuff? It's too bad they don't come sooner.
Right.
But it's usually at this place of, I can't think of anything else to do, and I'm willing to take this chance. And that's actually psychologically where you need to be.
Mhm.
You need to be at this place of
Surrender.
I'm willing to try anything now.
Mhm.
Yeah, it comes in lots of different forms, depression, anxiety, but we'll live with depression and anxiety. It's that place where you can't live with it anymore. However it's showing up is what creates the crisis. Just you finally hit bottom.
Yeah, I have my supervisor. I've been a clinician for a long time, and my supervisor always says, human beings only change when we can no longer tolerate the person we have become.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't matter if nobody else can tolerate us.
Yeah.
It only matters when we get sick enough of our condition.
Yeah.
And we're willing to do something about it. Yeah.
And that brings to mind the suicidal ideation and getting, like pushed up against that wall of like, I can't do this anymore. That's obviously another healing crisis of, I can't deal with myself anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 I'm looking and seeing for questions here. How has your offering of healing work changed from when you were at the Four Winds to your work with Joan and Juan?
My offering has changed in the sense of I learned how to tune energy with Juan and Juan and Joan. When I was with Alberto, there was just a sense of just bringing down some energy. Now I can actually tune the energy. I'm much more functional with being able to tune the energy to various frequencies, which I think is really effective in terms of matching where the stuck is energetically. Because you can just run the regular energy of vibration. If you look, this is where the physics comes into handy in a sense. You want to bring something that's in resonance with something. If something's stuck, you want to find a frequency that will resonate that stuckness from into fluidity. And so there's a finesse with being able to tune energy and being able to bring it into these different frequencies and meet that thing that place where it's stuck, and being able to get it to melt, essentially thaw. And also the thing that's really important about the traditional teachings is the energy that we're healing with is called Munai and Hampe Munai, and this is love. And we didn't talk about that in Alberto's. Munai was definitely a language that we talked, it was a concept that we talked about, but it was not an energetics that we learned how to tune, that we learned how to make, that we learned how to move, that we learned how to use as a healing frequency. We weren't really told what it was that this energy was that we were bringing down. It was just sort of some generic energy. So now it feels to me like I have much more technical finesse in a sense, but also because I understand. Here's the interesting thing about the tradition, about being part of a tradition, is when you get into those, the groove of a tradition, you have access to the information of that tradition. And Alberto gave us access to that tradition to a degree, but it was also mixed with North American things and who knows, various other things, which was sort of like he was four-wheeling with it in a little bit. But when you get into the actual worn groove of the tradition, there's a power in it. There's an energetics in it that you can just tap into and use. And Alberto's been doing this long enough now that he's starting to get some grooves in his four-wheel tracks. But and I use his work a lot still for my healing work. But the teachings, the other thing that I bring to my teachings that I didn't have from Alberto is the teaching of the Inca seed, is knowing that there's this part within you that is your pure full potential. And what happens with people in trauma and people who are wounded deeply is they don't know who they are, or they've created some vision of themselves that's really dysfunctional. And so bringing them back to their Inca seed and running through energy through their Inca seed to get it to come back online is part of recalibrating, reforming, reformatting them as a being. And I think that's another level that wasn't available in the Four Winds training.
Yeah, I have to say, Joan's and your focus on the Munai, the real traditional focus on the Munai is so huge, because it completely changes the way you think about healing.
Yeah.
And that the fact that you can actually generate it and give it,
yeah,
is huge. Yeah.
And it takes the fear out of energy.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that happens if you're in Juan and Yvonne's classes is they go, it's with Joan too. I haven't done in person with Joan. Juan and Yvonne just created this new online teaching where they have you face off with somebody and do an energetic exchange and bring it up to Munai. And whatever you're feeling creepy about, like you're going to exchange energy with this person, when you bring it up to love, there's nothing but love being exchanged. There's nothing scary about exchanging love with somebody. I mean, there might be something scary about being in love with somebody, but just exchanging energy back and forth is really, really quite safe and quite loving. And it's a beautiful medicine that, like, this is that safe place where love is just an energetic, not just, but it is an energetic, a safe energetic that we can use to heal with. You know, we romantic love and, you know, relationship love, we put a whole bunch of trappings on, but that there is this love. And here's the interesting thing. If you translate the word Munai, they don't have a word for will in the Andean tradition. The word Munai means love, but the way that they describe its meaning means love under our will. So it's an action. It's the act to love. And that will comes from our Inca seed, not from our ego. So it's the act to love. That's Munai. And to create that action to heal with love, it's good for you too, but it's really good for your client. And I think that piece is really important. Like you said, that's an important part of the healing work.
The other thing I was thinking when you were talking about Inca seed, and I don't know where I got this from, it might've been Joan, but that, you know, a rose seed becomes a rose, and a pine seed becomes a pine, and a cactus seed becomes a pine. A cactus seed does not become a rose. And that when you are in trauma, or when you are in that fight, flight, freeze, wherever you are in that process, that it's almost like the seed is in potting soil, but it's never been watered. Yes. And so you actually don't know what kind of a seed it is.
Yes.
You don't have any idea who you are until you start to water it.
Yes.
And then it takes time for the roots to come down and the little sapling or whatever it's called to come, a little sprout to come out. But you actually have to see the leaves before you can tell what that Inca seed is. And so it's that process of nurturing. And then once you find out if you're a cactus, a pine tree, or a rose bush, then you have some idea of what's next. You know, oh, this is who I am. Now I know what my life should look like, or where I'm meant to be, or who I'm meant to become. Or I just thought that was a beautiful analogy. I wish I could credit somebody. It might have been Joan.
Mm-hmm. It is beautiful, because if you're a cactus, you're not going to thrive in a lily pond. You know, it's just not going to work. So finding out who you really are is integral to the whole process. And one of the beliefs, or one of the, you know, the ideas about the Inca seed is the sperm and the egg come together, you know, in conception. And it's at that moment when you have those first two cells together that this little blip of the mystery, this, you know, a piece of God, if you will, whatever it is you want to call it, drops into those two cells, and it becomes you and only you. It's like your little Intel chip. It can only be you. It can't be anybody else. And so we have so much culturalization and parental expectation and peer expectation and, you know, religious expectation that we're supposed to be a certain way. And if that's going against what your Intel chip is telling you, you're mucking yourself up. You're creating a lot of heavy energy for yourself. You're not able to really step into who you are. And so there's this very interesting combination of, it's really important to be the individual that you are, to be part of the collective that we're all a part of. You have to express your individuality so that the collective has that part of that piece of the collective expressed. It's very collective, but it's also do your part, do your part to be part of the collective. And maybe part of your part of the collective is to go, yeah, I don't like the collective. That's got to be expressed in the collective too.
Well, it's so interesting too about that, expressing yourself, that if you are in an environment where it's not okay to be a rose bush, or it's not okay to be whatever your seed is, then it doesn't get watered, it doesn't get nurtured, it doesn't. And so then you really have to work to get out of that environment, or to create the conditions within yourself, I guess, which is the energy medicine, is creating the conditions within yourself to nurture that seed, regardless of whether the external community around you is willing to have that happen. You have to create the conditions inside of you for that to grow and nurture, maybe sight unseen for a while, right?
Yeah, and that's really part of developing your personal power, is to be able to go, I don't want to do that. I do want to do that. That's when we come back to that place of freeze, you don't have consent anymore. You can't say, I don't want to do that. I do want to do that. You have to kind of go along with the program so you don't get attacked, because you feel like you're going to get attacked, even if you're not going to get attacked. So you end up going all downstream from where you're supposed to be, who you're supposed to be. So it's really about reclaiming your personal power. And I know these become buzzwords in the shamanic tradition. Oh, do your work, become a person, and enhance your personal power. But your personal power is expressing who you really are. And these words get kind of diluted and cliched in the speaking of shamanism and self-development work. But what I love about the Andean tradition is it's implicit right in it. Like, here's your Inca seed. You have no other choice than to express it, get on with it. And that in and of itself will refine your personal power.
It has all that sort of rote stuff inside of it, but in a much different way.
Yeah.
So there's some chat going on about sort of current events and trauma going on in the world.
Oh, okay.
And so it might be nice to sort of address how we, in the world of the energetic, can send something to those situations, or how we can hold those situations in a way that serves healing and that doesn't buy into the drama, the sort of story. Well,
there's a couple layers to that. The first layer is to be able to pull yourself out of reaction, to be able to, so the basic premise of the Andean tradition is you have a field of energy around the outside of you, you have a body, and you have an Inca seed. Those are your three components. All three of them make what you call your wasi, your temple. And so what happens when you are not in alignment with yourself, everything's made out of this energy called Sami. It's conscious, intelligent energy. Your Sami, which you're made out of, in every way, shape, and form, absolutely everything gets slowed down. It gets slowed down like water gets stagnant, that doesn't move. So our energy fields, our energetics are always moving and flowing. When you start to be out of alignment with yourself, you start to slow your Sami down. You start to create what I like to call friction. It slows your Sami down. It creates what you call hucha, heavy energy on the outside of your bubble and throughout the inside of you. So when you're being reactive, when it's creating fear about what's going on in the outside world, you start creating hucha and you start being less effective in the world. So the first piece is bringing yourself back into harmony with yourself and clearing all the energetic work. But then you can also send energy from Mother Earth. Mother Earth is supporting energy. You can send, you can just take big scoops of energy from Mother Earth and send them, send it to Ukraine, send it to where it needs to go, send it to the school in Texas that just got, all the little ones, send it to their parents. You can just bring these, the earth energy, the earth Sami is different than the sky Sami. So whatever he feels in order, that motherly energy, that maternal nurturing energy is often what we're missing in these situations. So first is cleaning and clearing yourself, but then it's also to bring this healing energy from the sky and from the earth to those places just through your intention. There are there's whole ways to do that if you take the training that you can do it, but the basic thing is energy follows intention. So if you want to intend to just send some energy to this place, it's the same thing as prayer in a sense. You're sending this energy to wherever it needs to go.
I love that. I'm just writing it in the chat. Yeah. Yeah, I think that sometimes the problems of the world feel a little too big.
They're huge right now. Yeah, they're absolutely crazy right now. And I think that's in a sense why this medicine is really, it's been bubbling up for a while into the collective conscience and into the mainstream kind of awareness. I started studying with Alberto at the beginning of the 2000s. And he had been doing it still, I think he started in the 90s. I think Joan started in the 90s. And nobody knew what this stuff was back then. And now it's starting to be, a path and a way that to follow. And it's interesting because it's the way that Juan and Yvonne have translated it. It's a whole spiritual tradition. It's a whole way of life that you can step onto. You can become a Paco, you can become a healer. You can learn how to use the energy medicine to do healing, which is just the left side. But if the other two sides are all about how to be in a world and start to create harmony between differences, how to work in this place of making the world more harmonious instead of so divisive. And it's really part of the teachings that any and all of us need. But it's also, there is a whole section that's just for healing, for learning how to be a healer.
Yeah. One of the things we've been talking about at Shaman's Directory is the fact that there is a certain percentage of the population that is aware of shamanism in sort of the more fundamental or like Andean shamanism, Mongolian shamanism, Siberian shamanism, and they have some sort of an academic sense of shamanism. Yeah. And then there are other people who have a sense of indigenous rights and indigenous land. And so they come to shamanic knowledge in sort of a more activist kind of way. But then there's the whole rest of humanity that don't have any idea about shamanism or what kind of healing is accessible through it. And that's where we are hoping to sort of make shamanic healing a household word, like you would have a shaman, like you would have an acupuncturist or a massage therapist, or because of how relevant and how needed it is right now.
Yeah, and it's a very distinct form of medicine. It isn't therapy. I mean, although it dovetails with therapy nicely, it isn't acupuncture, although it dovetails with acupuncture nicely. It's its own medicine. And I agree. There needs to be a definition of that. And Reiki kind of dug a hole for itself, or a niche for itself and said, hey, we're a different kind of thing. We're energy medicine. And I think shamanism in some levels has a lot to overcome because it has been demonized. And so that's
where the Munai comes in.
Yes, exactly. And I have clients that come to me for trauma, and they're like, I don't tell my friends that I go to you. And I go, okay. And they go, I don't call you a shaman. I go, okay. And they're like, I call you, and they have got different, they've coined different words for it. And I'm like, and then eventually they start to go, my shaman, and so the mainstream has a knee-jerk reaction to the word. And then there are people that sort of, like decide they're shamans and don't have any training, which people can argue isn't important, but I would say if I didn't have training, I would just be willy-nilly all over the place, and my ego would be getting involved in where it shouldn't, and all kinds of things. So those people sometimes bring it down, just like there's anyone who just kind of decides to do something and
put out a shingle and don't really have
I get calls from people that go, so and so who says they're a shaman, just reamed me for la 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 la, and I go, that doesn't sound like they were actually working with you and where you're stuck and that kind of stuff. So it's tricky. I mean, the word has so much baggage, but that I think we can either like go in and embrace it and bring it up, or we can just go but there's nothing else to call yourself. There's not a better word.
And that's where we've been really working on that. Every conversation is necessary to bring people to a place of understanding. And I just did a training the other day for a bunch of clinicians, and what we all came to the conclusion of at the end is that shamanism is just another way to connect. So instead of, if you have your own way, you might do yoga, you might have a meditation practice, whatever your way is of connecting, shamanism is just another way to connect.
Interesting.
So it's a place to start that conversation for people who are asking, how do you start the conversation? I would say it's just another way to connect.
Yeah. And there's so much expectation too about the word, like that you're supposed to be some supernatural being. And when I used to teach yoga, I would say, there is a yoga teacher for everyone. When you don't know that much yoga, there's still somebody that wants to learn that much yoga. So and I appreciate you're bringing all these different perspectives together, because that's not an easy thing to do. And the perspectives themselves get into little gnashes with each other, like about what's truth and what's not truth. And you have to go, wait a minute. We're all this one fire. All of our medicine, like you say, all of our medicine it's like the Inca seed. All of our Inca seeds make us this big shamanic field that is, I think, helping shift humanity, because right now humanity is amok. But I think there is a place for each one of us shifting ourselves and shifting the collective. And there are people that are waking up and doing that.
I wish I could think of this woman's name. Mayumi might know, or somebody who's working on the directory might know. Back towards the beginning of the pandemic, there was a Peruvian woman who got stuck in California, and they made a video of her speaking. And she said that it doesn't matter if you are an internationally known healer, or if you're stuck somewhere all by yourself in the middle of nowhere in a hut somewhere, your intention makes a difference. So wherever you are, wherever you're starting from, makes a difference. And that's the thing about everyone's medicine is necessary. No matter where you are or what your reach, the intention, like you said, energy follows intention. So,
and the tricky part about that is making your intentions conscious, right? Because we're always intending things.
Something.
Right. And so the journey is to bring our intentions to consciousness and hone them so that they are really effective.
Looking in the chat. Is there anything you recommend as a practice, like a daily practice to sort of become aware of your Inca seed, we were talking about the fight, flight, or freeze and moving beyond that. Are there any practices that you would recommend for people to you said being conscious is the main thing, just being aware.
Yeah, there is a practice. There's a daily practice that we do as Pacos in this tradition. I don't know if you want to do it right now or if you want to wait toward the end of the class, but it's
Whatever you prefer. Yep.
we can do it now. It will make us a little spacey. It'll make put us into that nice juicy zone. But let me describe it.
Okay.
The idea is that there are three worlds essentially. There's the upper world, middle world that we're all in, and the lower world. In the upper world, it's pure, clean, clear Sami energetics. In the middle world, there's a mix of Sami and Hucha. Hucha is just slow Sami. There's a mix because we are here. Humans are the only ones that have Hucha, so we're mucking things up. And then the lower world is the unconscious. There's a lot of other stuff you can say about it, but it's not hell. There's no place, you're not getting punished there and anything like that. It's the unclaimed stuff, but it's also the inside of the earth. So one of the things we have this Inca seed kind of halfway between our head and our feet, in the middle of our body. So we can do this practice where we pull down this beam of Sami through intention from the upper world, from the cosmos, from the highest vibration of sparkly Sami that there is, and bring it down and take it over the outside of our Pokpo. Our Pokpo is our energy field, and clean it and clear it. And then we can also, as we're doing that, pull it straight down through us, all the way to the earth. And what that's doing is it's washing the Hucha, the heavy energy, to the earth. It's washing it through us, or it's speeding the Hucha back up to Sami. But secondarily, what it's doing, or maybe primarily, is it's taking this big wash of energy right through our Inca seed down to the earth. Our Inca seed's always connected to the Hanak Pacha through a little place at the top of our head, but now we're bringing this big beam of Sami down through our being, and it just clears all the Hucha out, activates the Inca seed, gives it a little more oomph, and that alone is the daily practice you would want to do.
And the clearing then takes anything that you're nervous about, afraid of, holding on to, all that stuff that gets us stuck. The clearing allows that to just drain out.
Yeah, exactly. So the things that create the Hucha, the heavy energy, are the things that you're out of alignment with yourself, that you're worrying about. When you're not at peace, you're creating Hucha. That's not fair to say, because you can be really angry, and that can be a clean expression of the situation. You're not in conflict about being angry, and you're not creating Hucha. Mm-hmm. It's important to say that, because we tend to, in our culture, in our new age kind of culture and Christian-based culture, like negative energies create negative emotions create heavy energy. Well, they can create heavy energy. Somebody else can react to you when you're angry and create heavy energy for themselves. But if you're genuinely angry and you've been, violated in some way, that's a clean and clear, honest expression of how you're feeling. If you start to take it out on people and do crazy things or get passive aggressive, all that, then you start to create Hucha. But feeling anger does not create Hucha. I think we have to be able to reclaim that ability to feel what we feel, but move through it and let it go into the earth. Yeah. So when I guide these things, and I'll guide us in a little bit, is, whatever feels tight, constricted, out of alignment. I like to call it gunky or icky, like let it drain into the earth. And here's the beautiful thing about this tradition. Shamanic traditions are about honoring the earth and nature and cycles. And so there's got to be a place that's safe to put that stuff, doesn't there? In our culture, we're like, oh no, I don't want to get your heavy energy. Oh my God. But in the Andean tradition, I'm like, yeah, that's candy to Mother Earth, to Pachamama. She wants that. That's a treat for her. She's going to give you back some Sami because you gave her the Hucha. She's going to give you an exchange for that. She's going to go, thank you so much. Have some Sami. So the tradition in itself creates this cycle of we tend to be linear, right? Like, oh no, it's hot potato stuff. What am I going to do with this heavy energy? You take it. No, I'm going to take it. Oh, I got it from her. Oh no. And whereas in this tradition, it's like, yeah, just wash it to the earth. And you're actually giving her some yummies, and she's going to actually give you some back. And there's this whole exchange that happens. It's called Aini.
Mm. So I'm wondering if it's okay with you. We've got a few hands raised. If it's
Yeah.
okay with you for me to let some people ask questions just
Sure.
out loud and have you answer them. So I'm just going to switch the view to gallery here so we can see everybody, and we'll take a show of hands. And I think Robert had his hand raised. And then Mayumi had a question as well.
I have two things I want to say. One is, I love what you're saying. I think it's very clear. It's not anything I didn't know, but I think you put it so well. I think it's something that I would really encourage you to put out for the people of Uvalde.
The people of what?
The people in Texas.
Oh, right. Oh, yes, Uvalde, yes.
The path they have to follow. I mean, it's a path they have to follow. It's not a maybe. It's cleaning that has to happen. Yeah. And it's to honor those children that are still left.
Yeah.
In that community. So I would really encourage you to put out what you're saying in words that regular people can understand of what that jamming is going to do to that community. Yeah. And to their lives. For it would take them decades to clean that out if they have no understanding of what's involved. Secondly, I agree that Mother Earth will take it, but I think it's a really important thing every day to breathe with the plants, to love them, to love the earth, to send your loving energy into the earth, because the earth needs cleaning. Yes, the Mother Earth will take it, but I think long term, we are earth, and that Munai that we are needs to be in the earth also. There's no, we've come through centuries of no, you have to go high and leave the earth. No, you have to stay on the earth. No, we need it all because we are all of it. And I think we really need to bring the Munai actively each and every day. Just to tell the trees you're driving along, I love you. I'm so glad that you're here.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that it's an either or. I think it's an and. Because in the tradition, the earth is just a transmuter of heavy energy. So you're not giving her anything ugly. You're just giving her what you can. It's just like poop makes the garden grow, right? Fertilizer makes the garden grow. But loving her is a whole nother level of exchange. As you love, she loves. You give back and forth. There's this whole thing that we call Aini in the tradition. So absolutely, I think both are important. Thank you, Robert. Good insights.
And Mayumi.
Thank you, Christina, for your beautiful talk. I've also had the liberty to take the foundation classes, and I was just wondering, from your perspective, how your work has evolved from doing to being. And this is also, of course, related to the teachings you gave. And I thought that would be probably interesting for the people in this call.
So I think I know what you mean, but would you explain more just so I answer your question correctly?
Okay. No, well, I believe also with Joan Parisi Wilcox, she talks a lot about the fourth level and really also, rather than doing a lot of different things to really kind of connect energetically, and that a lot of work can be done. So I was just wondering, like, how you integrate that in your work, or if your work has changed throughout the course of your practices.
Yeah. There is a whole teaching in the Andean, in the foundation series, about what we call 7 levels of consciousness, of human awareness, of ways that you engage the world. And they parallel a lot of different traditional aspects or traditional viewpoints. But the 4th level is the level that Juan and Yvonne and Joan and I all teach from, which is this place of not being caught in this is right and this is wrong. Like, you can't turn your Misha upside down or the world will go, I've heard these things. You can't turn your Misha upside down or your life will go crazy. You can't, all these kinds of rules, but to come into that place of where you are in the art of working with the energetic. And I think I'm not sure if I'm answering your question properly or to point, but what it makes me think of is this idea of congruence. And that's the being part. The more you can clear the hucha off your energy field, the more your energy field is congruent with the source energy. And the more you become part of the whole fabric of the universe, and you can be part of the journey of driving that and being it and creating with it and healing with it, and being with it. We tend to get a little caught. The third level is the level where we're right and we're wrong, and I'm in this group and you're in that group, which is where most of us are in our culture. And you can see it's at its peak of dysfunction right now in our culture. And that may very well be because we're breaking into the fourth level. And the fourth level is this place of harmony, of joining, of saying, you know, you say tomato, I say tomato. It doesn't really matter. It's still that red thing. Right. And so what I'm sensing you're saying is how do you talk about the being? The being is something we all share. The being is the inside of the pot, essentially. The being is that energetics that we're all made out of. We have individuality and we can use it. But as humans, we get caught in the egoic structures of me and mine and you and yours. When we get to that fourth level, we get to how can my ego support your ego so we can co-create this whole thing. And that's actually one of the beautiful things that I've found when in working with Joan is Joan, you know, I've worked with a lot of women who work from jealousy and cattiness and power differentials, and Joan never did any of that. She's just like, come along, you know, you have your strengths, I have mine, let's go, let's see how we can do this. You know, where I was deficit, she would just hold space for me to come up. Where I had some strengths that she, you know, she was still developing, I would hold space for her to get there, and we would work together. And so this is, I think, a model for how we all can start working is looking at, you know, what are the differences and how can we harmonize those instead of dig in on, well, I'm this and you're that and I'm better, because there's none of that matters. None of that judgment stuff really matters at the fourth level. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, it does. I was just also wondering, like, for example, when we get teachings also with the four winds, we kind of also do things, yeah, like using the rattle or, you know, using stones and equipments and things like that. And I feel like with the fourth level work is less about that. And of course we do still things because we put energy behind it and we make despachos or fire ceremonies. And of course it really creates a big difference. But I kind of sense that, through intention and that leads to energy and healing as well. That is kind of like one of the key practices as well with using this work of energy. So that I was kind of also wondering about that, how you use that in your work. So, or if that's shifted in your work.
I get it. I get what you're saying. It's a good question. What I think what you realize, the further you go with this, is the less you need accoutrements, but your client needs them still. So there's this thing of, if you just went like, and be like, I just paid a bunch of money for you just to hold your hand up, you know? And so but there's also a thing that happens when you use the things. It invokes emotion in your client, it evokes shift and change in your client, and it evokes surrender in your client. So I like to use the rattle still a lot, because I think when I can get both rattles going, it can get their mind to go into that big hyperspace. So there's things that maybe if I was a fifth level healer, I could just be able to blip them into, but I'm not there yet. So there is this sense of the further you go, the less you need in terms of you know, accoutrements, but there is also your client involved in the situation, and how are you going to exchange with your client, and how is your client going to follow where you're going, and how are they going to, you know, let the medicine in and acknowledge since that the medicine is happening, and be able to work with them. So yeah, you're right. The further you go, the less you have to do. But again, you also have to work with your client to that degree, to some degree.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
good
Yeah, I'm not there yet at all, but I was just wondering. Thank you.
That's great. We have one more hand up. Diane
Yeah.
has been
Yes.
patiently waiting.
Thank you. Thank you. I have lots of questions and I'm sorry I'm not showing my video. I'm still in pajamas. But I appreciate, Christina, just all that you've shared, all your wisdom. Thank you so much. I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit, because this whole thing that happened, the killing in Uvalde is, pretty impactful. And I'm just wondering if you could share from your wisdom eyes, shamanic wisdom eyes, a little bit of your take on the situation, and if there's anything that we as shamanic practitioners, those of us who practice, how can we support that community or anything else that so because I do go into this helplessness and this despair so quite easily when there have been shootings in the last few weeks in different parts of the country. Thank you so much for your answer.
You're welcome. I don't have all the answers, but I will lead us in a little practice where we can send them energy. I think there's a few different ways to look at it. I think at the literal level, it's absolutely horrifying. It's at the emotional level, it's absolutely horrifying. But I also think like we're hitting this crescendo of like, we're not going to take it anymore, and there's going to be a straw that breaks it. And right now in Texas, there's two things that are going on at the same time. There's an NRA rally, and there's this whole they're not very far apart. They're like 100 miles apart, and Uvalde. And so there's this thing that's building, and no one wants to say, well, those kids were part of, were sacrificed for the whole. That seems really callous, but it is part of what is happening at if you want to call the mythic level, there's this place where we are hitting this crescendo of we're just not going to take it anymore. This is not okay anymore. We're going to have to make some changes because we're stuck in politics around all of this, and we're not doing what needs to be done. And different people will argue what needs to be done, and that we can go down the rabbit hole with that. But what we can do is support the survivors. In the Andean tradition, those that passed will stick around for about 8 days, and then their Inca seed will go back to the Hanakpacha, the upper world, and their souls will be imprinted in the earth. How far they got and what their story was will be left in the earth for us to source from. So they're not completely lost to us. They are still, whatever their little lives were, they contributed to the evolution of the human collective. And I hope at the very core of my being that it didn't go unheard, that this is the last of this that we have to do, because it's really, it is horrifying, and it's almost too much to get your mind around. But if you guys want to do a little bit of energy work together, we can send them a whole bunch of juice from Pachamama and just support all the family members that are going through this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, are there any other questions before we do that?
I do not see any more hands. I think everybody's ready to offer some healing where it's needed.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with what we talked about before, which is the Saman Shakwi, where we're going to pull energy down over our bubble. I'll lead us through it all so you don't have to remember, but we're going to bring it down over our bubble and just let it clean and clear the hucha, the heavy energy, just wash it to the earth. We're going to bring it down through us, cleaning and clear the inside of us, activating our Inca seed. Once we are clean and clear, we're going to, through our intention, kind of create a group bubble. And from that group bubble, we're going to pull some energy up from Pachamama, from Mother Earth. And through our intention, we're just going to send it, a big silo of it, a big tube of it over to Uvalde. Does that sound okay?
Great.
Okay. So I like to do it. I like to close my eyes and go inside. And I like to take stock, like what's going on in your body. Where do you feel uncomfortable, tense, tight, anxious, out of alignment with yourself? Just notice. And if you're sensitive enough to notice your energy field, sense its status, sense how gooey and gummy it might be, how clean and clear it might be. Just having a sense of where you are right now. And then there's a lot of ways to connect to the earth, but I like to put my feet right on it. You can have your shoes on, but connect your feet to the earth. Your bubble goes right into the earth, so you're connected already. And what we're going to do is through our intention, we're going to reach up. You don't have to bring your hands up. I'm just doing it for demonstration, and bring down a beam of Sami from the upper world, from the cosmos, and bring it down. And we're going to just start by spilling it over the outside of our energy field. Just cleaning and clearing the muck, the hucha, the heavy stuff that we generate each and every day just by being humans. Because part of us is an animal and part of us is a metaphysical being. Just at that level, we create hucha. Just let the Sami wash over us. All around the outside. It's called Saman Shakwi. It's a shower of Sami. And then in addition to that, we're going to bring more of that beam down through the crown of our head, all the way through our body, our being, our hanchi, and all the way through our feet, through our tail, however you want to get it, all the heavy energy in your body. Give it that place to go, to the earth. Let it all be washed down into the earth. And feel the tension leave. The constriction, the heavy emotions. Just keep things flowing. And I want to remind you that as that Sami is coming all the way through the middle of your being, it's passing through your heart to that space underneath your heart where your Inca seed lives. And it's continuing all the way down, but just let that Sami come through and ignite and feed your Inca seed, your Inca moyu. Giving it permission to be who it is. And finding your strength in that. Okay, and then we're going to stop that flow of Sami coming down from the cosmos over our bubble and through our being. And just take stock of how Sami filled you are. And the more Sami filled you are, the more power you have to work with the energetic. So now we have a little more juice to move that column that we're going to create and send it to Uvalde. And let's just imagine ourselves in this big bubble, all of us on Zoom. Just feel yourself all sort of standing around in a circle. And with our combined power, combined Inca seeds, combined intentions, around the outside of us, we're going to raise this big column of energy from Mother Earth. And we're just going to bring it up slowly to our hips. We're going to bring it up to our shoulders, up to our heads. And before we send it anywhere, take as much of this as you need to support yourself. Because there's an endless supply of this. We're not taking from what's going to go anywhere. And as you feel nurtured by that Sami from the Mother Earth, from Pachamama, together we're going to pull this beam, this column of Sami up from the earth, up over our heads as a group, and we're going to direct it to the town of Uvalde. And we're just going to let it go wherever it needs to go to, whoever it needs to go to support these beings in crisis. And the beautiful thing about energy work is you don't have to keep revising your intention. Once you set it into flow, it flows. So it's just going to keep coming up from the earth and spilling over that town. And then if you can find gratitude for your existence, for being safe, if you can find love in your heart, add that to the flow. Add some moonai to the flow. Send them some love. There are specific ways to do this in the tradition, but we're just going to do it through intention. Just send them not only that Sami from Pachamama, but your love from the human collective. And then we're going to slowly pull that column of Sami from the earth, all the Munai that we're sending back over our heads. And we're going to let it drop back down into the earth, knowing that you can go home and do this as much as you want to after the class and anytime you feel called to. And come back into the room, into the box, into our boxes. Okay, any comments, questions?
I'm scanning all the faces. Lucita. Oh, you're muted.
Hi, Christina. I just want to say thank you for this. It's amazing. It's just magnificent. While we were sending Sami, I was wondering, the thought occurred to me, is it possible to send it to people who are the perpetrators as well as the victims?
Yeah, you can send it anywhere you want to.
Thank you.
Yeah, Munai might be nice for those guys.
Yeah,
Seem to be a little short on it.
totally. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Even the politicians, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And the officers, and all that other.
It's true. Yeah, it's such a mess. It really is. I just all I can do is just keep generating that intention that we're just not going to take this anymore. Something's going to crack. We're going to do something about this, because it's just hit. It's just been ramping up since, it's funny because COVID, all the shooters went into isolation, and now they're back with a vengeance.
I can't help but feeling this is really a whole national health issue. It has repercussions going into decades and decades if it isn't stopped.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
So, and it goes worldwide. We're watching a psychopath ruining 40 million people's lives. So it just needs to stop.
Yeah.
So I want to honor the time, and I see a lot of thank yous, amazing, beautiful, wonderful. Everything brings tears to my eyes, all kinds of great things in the chat. So I just want to thank everyone for coming today to join us, and thank Christina for your wisdom, your heart, your soul, and your moon eye. And we would be delighted to have you back anytime you like. Great. And we will release everyone to the rest of your weekend. And this recording will be available on YouTube in a day or so. So thank you all for being here, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Christina.
You're welcome.
Feel free to add anything you want, Christina.
I just wanted to also thank you guys for putting this together, because I know I'm not the only one that you're interviewing. I know you're interviewing lots and lots of different shamans and lots of different ways of being. And I encourage you guys to keep continuing to show up for these talks and support this new directory, because it's part of the way forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Aho, as we like to say around here. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank
you,
you,
Christina.